Today, our mission is kind of fascinating. We're analyzing a pretty detailed career and financial blueprint. And it's dedicated entirely to what's often called the dreamer archetype.
Yeah.
Highly creative, deeply empathetic, but sometimes, well, challenged with boundaries. We're really digging into how these incredibly imaginative thinkers can not just survive, but actually thrive in the material world.
Yeah, it's a really interesting mix, isn't it? Psychology and finance, essentially. We're looking at quite a bit of source material here. It details how someone who's mainly driven by, let's say, strong intuition and this real desire to help, to alleviate suffering, how they translate those, nag material goals into actual professional success. And maybe most importantly, financial stability. It's all about building that bridge, a solid one, between that rich inner world and the, well, sometimes pretty demanding external economy.
Okay, yeah, let's unpack that because we have several sources calling imagination and intuition the absolute superpower here, non-negotiable. So for you listening, what we want to do is pull out the specific skills that really translate into high-value contributions in the marketplace. And also, critically, those adjustments they need to make structurally, to prevent that chronic burnout and that financial drift we sometimes see.
Exactly, because let's be honest, the market rarely pays just for good intentions, right? It pays for value that's structured, that's delivered. So the goal of this deep dive really is to show how this dreamer type can install that needed structure without sacrificing who they fundamentally are.
Absolutely. Let's start with the strengths, the assets. Because the analysis is honestly extremely positive about the core abilities. The identity seems rooted in creativity, intuition, compassion, all that good stuff. This archetype, they don't just see the world as it is. They see the potential, right? Like the sources say, not just as it is, but as it could be.
And that visionary perspective, that's actually what creates the demand in the market. They spot the gaps, they see the suffering or maybe just the lack of beauty where other people might just see, well, routine. This knack for spotting future trends or identifying unmet emotional needs.
Yeah.
That's what makes them potentially indispensable in certain fields.
Okay, so what are those specific fields? Because saying the arts feels a bit too general, and our sources are definitely more precise.
Yeah, they are. The list provided really focuses on roles that have deep relational meaning. So think healing professions, counseling, maybe physical therapy, holistic medicine, also nonprofit leadership, music therapy comes up, high-level creative direction, even roles involving spiritual guidance.
So it's not just about being creative in a vacuum. It's about applying that creativity and empathy
Yeah.
directly to human connection, to solving problems for people. And when the work lines up with what they feel is their soul's purpose, the sources suggest that internal drive gets so strong that success almost follows naturally.
That's the idea. It stops feeling like work in the traditional sense and becomes more of a calling. But, and this is a big but, here's the critical pivot point our sources highlight. That intense focus on the inner world, on emotional connection, it often clashes pretty violently with external demands. Things like metrics, deadlines, and just the, let's face it, sometimes brutal reality of office politics or client demands.
Right. And this is where we get into the core conflict, isn't it? The sort of necessary truth about this archetype. The main struggle identified in the data is generally not a lack of talent. It's this difficulty with boundaries. And also, yeah, engaging with the practical, mundane aspects of life, as one source puts it.
That really is the crux of it. The visionary mind, almost by definition, resists being boxed in, constrained. And we see this play out in primarily two major ways, according to the data. First, there's the practical side, getting so wonderfully lost in those dreams and ideas that, well, you genuinely forget to pay bills on time, or you neglect project timelines, or you just chronically underestimate how much effort those administrative tasks actually take. The inner world just kind of overrules the calendar.
Okay, but is that just, sophisticated procrastination? What do the sources say when this pattern repeats, when they consistently fail to deliver on the mundane?
Well, the sources are quite clear. It's typically not framed as a moral failing. It's presented more as an energy drainage problem, which leads directly into the second and maybe deeper challenge, the empathy drain. Because this archetype often has such a high level of emotional sensitivity or receptivity, they just easily absorb the stress, the negativity, even the trauma of colleagues or clients. So you're talking about emotional leakage. They're like splurges. And that capacity to feel deeply, which is their greatest professional asset in many ways, it flips and becomes their biggest liability, leading straight to, well, catastrophic burnout sometimes.
Precisely. Our sources don't just say, oh, they get drained. They describe it almost as a physiological response. where the person actually loses the ability to access their own intuition because their internal system is just overloaded with everyone else's emotional noise.
Wow. Okay, so success then hinges not just on using the talent, but on actively building these really rigorous, intelligent boundaries. What's the key action item, the non-negotiable thing the analysis points to counter this energy leak?
The recommendation is pretty stark, actually. Boundary creation isn't treated as a soft skill. It's framed as a professional survival mechanism, and it often requires scripting. Like, instead of just hoping you'll feel strong enough in the moment to say no, the advice is often to have pre-written, practiced boundary-setting phrases ready to go. Okay, give us an example. What's a boundary tool that's maybe tailored for this empathetic mindset?
One specific technique suggested is implementing what they call the 24-hour rule for emotionally heavy requests. So, if a colleague or client dumps a highly charged problem on you, one that clearly needs more than, say, 5 minutes of intense focus, you respond with something like, "Thank you for trusting me with this. I need 24 hours to process this properly and make sure I can give you my best thinking on it."
That's actually brilliant. It honors the request, shows you care, but it builds in that crucial space. That space for energetic protection. It stops the immediate absorption, the immediate processing of external stress.
Exactly. It creates a buffer. And that buffer, according to the analysis, is absolutely essential for professional longevity. It prevents overwhelm.
Okay, let's pivot now. From boundaries around time and energy to boundaries around wealth, finance. This relationship with money sounds complex too. If they struggle to protect their time, it makes sense they might struggle to protect resources. Our sources definitely note this natural tendency towards sometimes extreme generosity and maybe a genuine dismissal of material wealth just for its own sake.
Yeah, and this is where that avoidance behavior can become really acute. The data suggests this archetype might actively avoid looking at bank statements, or engaging with budgets, or even planning financially for the future because those practical structures just feel, well, too harsh, or restrictive, or frankly just boring compared to their creative work. Managing money feels like putting their free spirit in a cage.
Which is exactly why the reframe suggested in the analysis is so important, so powerful. Stop seeing financial management as a constraint or just some necessary evil you have to endure. The key is to actively reframe it. See it as an act of self-care, something that protects your future ability to create and to help others.
And what's really fascinating is the analogy provided in several sources. Think of your budget not as that cage limiting you, but as a sturdy container. Something designed specifically to hold and protect your creative energy. This container ensures you have the peace of mind you need, that financial foundation, so you're not wasting precious emotional energy worrying about survival, which in turn frees you up to focus on the meaningful work you actually want to do.
Makes sense. And for someone who maybe struggles with the day-to-day details, automation seems like the obvious key here. Maintaining that container without constantly having to wrestle with the numbers.
Absolutely. The most practical tip that comes up repeatedly is automate everything possible, not just the bill payments, but also specific transfers to savings accounts that are named for their purpose, their aspirational purpose. So our sources actually recommend setting up things like a creative freedom fund or maybe a compassion fund.
Ah, that's clever. That's not just generic savings advice. It uses the dreamer's own language, their own values. By naming the fund something meaningful, like that freedom fund, the act of saving stops being a mundane chore. It becomes a direct contribution to their deepest desire, right? The ability to maintain autonomy, creative space, freedom.
Exactly. It leverages their imaginative strength to counter that practical weakness. Automation handles the mechanics, the doing, and visualization, the naming, provides the why, the motivation. It makes it feel aligned, not imposed.
Okay, so if we tie all these threads together, the need for meaning, the boundary issues, the financial reframing, the work environment itself becomes critical. Our sources state pretty unequivocally that a high-pressure, cutthroat corporate setting where maybe metrics always trump mission, that kind of place will almost inevitably feel, and I quote, soul-crushing.
Yeah, they need the right conditions to flourish. Like a plant needs the right soil. They need meaning. They need trust. They need a supportive, compassionate space. One that genuinely recognizes the value of intuition and creative expression, not just the bottom line. If the environment is toxic or overly critical, Their high sensitivity means those unique gifts, the empathy, the intuition, they immediately become liabilities. They won't just quit. They'll likely burn out spectacularly first.
But the overall narrative, the future trajectory for this archetype, it sounds incredibly hopeful, provided they implement these structural safeguards we've discussed. The sources talk about an invitation to step into your personal power and take charge of your own narrative.
Right. And this transition, it isn't about fundamentally changing who you are. It's much more about valuing who you are in a tangible way. The ultimate goal seems to be building genuine self-confidence, learning to demand and receive fair compensation for their unique contributions.
Yeah.
Contributions that are often based on empathy and intuition. It's about finding ways to quantify the value of the intangible.
So the final synthesis offered by the analysis, it's actually quite beautiful. It says, the journey is about building that strong bridge, a bridge between the beautiful, rich inner world and the practical material world, proving really that you absolutely can be both spiritual and successful. You can be both a dreamer and a doer.
Yeah, we've seen that the biggest assets, that incredible imagination, that deep empathy are intrinsically linked to the biggest challenges. Things like boundary failure and financial avoidance. But the solution isn't trying to fight the dreamer's nature. It's about building protection around that nature. The core task is really installing automated, protected structures where maybe intuition alone used to rule.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you, the listener, as you head back into your week? It means your visionary qualities, your empathy, these are absolutely currency. They have real value. But they require that robust, sturdy container we talked about, like that scripted boundary response or that automated freedom fund. That container is needed to prevent those valuable assets from just leaking away energetically or financially.
And maybe if you take just one core idea away from this deep dive, let it be this. Often, the greatest barrier to professional and financial success for this archetype isn't external. It's internal. It's the inability to consistently prioritize their own needs alongside the needs of others.
So here's a final thought to mull over. If your biggest challenge right now is neglecting boundaries, or maybe avoiding that bank statement, could learning to firmly, kindly say no when needed, or setting up that simple automated transfer to your freedom fund, could that be the single most financially rewarding skill you develop this year? Something to think about as you build your own bridge from dream to reality.